Chicago Bears. They're first up on the clock here. They had pick 9.
Yes.
Traded down one spot to pick 10 to get Darnell Wright, the tackle out of Tennessee. They stay in the SEC with their second pick. GERVON, DEXTER, the defensive tackle out of Florida. TYRIQUE STEVENSON, the corner out of Miami, was their second round pick. We saw Zach Pickens, another defensive tackle from the SEC, out of South Carolina in the third. And then early in round 4, Roschon Johnson, the running back out of Texas. Kind of like that pick there. Tyler Scott, the speedy wide receiver out of Cincinnati, who a lot of people had going much higher in this draft.
He ended up being the second one of his own team somehow.
He did, yeah. Trey Turner went ahead of him. Noah Sewell, the linebacker out of Oregon. Terrell Smith, your guy, cornerback out of Minnesota.
Let's go.
Some of the highlights there on day 3 for the Bears. So, overall, Sam, what are your thoughts on the Bears haul?
Overall, I didn't love it. So starting question would be, do we factor in the move made weeks ago to trade out of number 1 down to where they ended up starting before they...
In our analysis, yes.
Okay.
My take on the Bears is I think their process has been very sound over the last 2 years. I think a lot of the Bears' team-building process, not perfect. Of course, they traded for Chase Claypool for what ended up being pick 32.
Yeah.
Process-wise, I love the Bears. Now, the part that we're supposed to not be as confident in, the actual player evaluation part of it, that's what I don't like as much. So take that for what it's worth. I like some of the players. I don't love some of the players that they took with their first few picks. I think process-wise, though, the Bears accumulating a ton of picks the last 2 years, the way they've spent in free agency, the way they traded down from 1 and got DJ Moore and the extra picks, and they're set up for next year. I think the Bears as a franchise are making a lot of good moves from a process standpoint. Now, carry on.
Yeah, so if you factor in that they started off with number 1 overall, they decided they were going to stick with Justin Fields, not pivot to a Bryce Young or whoever else they might have picked at number 1 overall, trade out. They pick up DJ Moore along the way in addition to everything else they got for that move. So if you give them the credit for that, you start from a very high point because I think that's a solid move. That was the correct decision to make. Now you're starting at number 9. You trade down one spot with Philadelphia and get the guy you were going to get anyway. You assume that Chicago simply wasn't interested in Jalen Carter, whether they had him off the board, whatever. They're just not picking him, at which point they're happy to move back one spot, essentially for free, right? They pick up an extra pick for nothing for a guy that they weren't drafting anyway. They grab Darnell Wright. An interesting decision, right? Paris Johnson Jr. had already gone, but Peter Skoronski was on the board. That was a guy that was being talked about a lot for Chicago. Pre-draft, someone that made sense to fill potentially either spot, whether it's guard or tackle. Instead, they go for Darnell Wright, the Tennessee tackle, who, a kind of monster physical specimen, a guy that absolutely moves people when he gets contact on them. But, as you pointed out before, has one of the worst run blocking profiles we've ever seen from an offensive tackle coming into the NFL. So an interesting pick to grab him that high. Then I think so at that point it becomes, do you love the value they got and do you love the players they got? The next 3 picks are a combination of not liking either of them. Whether either I didn't like the value or I didn't like the player. TYRIQUE STEVENSON is just a corner I did not like in the process and have a lot lower than everybody else. So I'm automatically not going to like that as much as other people.
Yeah, the one thing I did say on draft night, though, as far as the Darnell Wright pick, for a guy that, again, is 330 pounds, people will describe him as a mauler and he crushes people and his best blocks look really good. One of the highest percentage of negatively graded blocks. He is in the right system, so a system that is going to use the quarterback as a runner like Justin Fields, that will make blocking easier for the offensive line because of the indecision that the defensive line and especially the linebackers have to face. We see this a lot where linebackers are trying to figure out where the ball is, and before you know it, boom, the tackle's there. Wright moves well. He's going to get up there and wreck some linebackers, while they're trying to figure out, is it Justin Fields? Is it Roschon Johnson in the backfield? Is it Khalil Herbert? Who has the ball, So I think the fit, as far as maybe minimizing some of his negatives, Darnell Wright's negatives is good. Wright also looks like a very good pass protector. He's continued to improve there. People always cite the Will Anderson game, but there was others. He is a very polished pass protector but just a 1 year sample of that for Wright at Tennessee. So he'll step in and play right tackle. I did listen to a little bit of Matt Eberflus and Ryan Poles. They thought he was the best lineman in the draft with the most upside. So they're saying, hey, we think he's good, citing his pass blocking, but they said there's room to grow there. And look, last year at this time they took Braxton Jones in the 5th round, small school, and developed him pretty well. So that's what you're banking on if you're the Bears. I wasn't as low on Tyrique Stevenson. You were the only one that I really talked to that hated Tyrique Stevenson as much as you did. So.
I got very strong Artie Burns type vibes from him.
Same school scouting.
Yeah, actually, I never even made that connection before. But also same team, Chicago had Artie Burns for a while.
They did.
I don't like a lot of what he does. He's another one of these guys who's athletically there. You can see that he can be a really good player, but he's reasonably good in man coverage, although he lunges a lot of times and misses, and when he does, it's bad. But I don't know that he can play zone at all at the moment. I don't know. So last year, the Bills drafted Kaiir Elam in the 1st round, and Christian Benford, by the time training camp rolled around, or by the time week 1 rolled around, a 6th round draft pick had jumped him on the depth chart and was the guy starting and ahead of him basically all season long, outside of injuries. Wouldn't shock me in the slightest if Terrell Smith, the 5th rounder that they got out of Minnesota, jumped Tyrique Stevenson in the same way.
I will say, I'll just drop the draft model insight in here that will be just interesting to follow for our listeners.
Okay.
The Bears, because Terrell Smith is low too, because we're taking in full careers.
Yeah, the previous seasons when he wasn't good.
because the way I've run the model, it is based off full career.
Uh-huh.
And Terrell Smith is a guy who broke out late.
Yes.
Darnell Wright is a guy who broke out late. So the model as a whole
doesn't like
them, but you can understand. Like I can understand watching last year's film and saying, yeah, I love Darnell Wright or I love Terrell Smith from Minnesota. But I will say 3 out of the 4 Bears top picks, including the 2 defensive tackles, Zach Pickens and GERVON DEXTER, 3 out of the top 4, and then Terrell Smith, were all in the teens from a percentile standpoint in the model.
That's not good.
So I'm just saying, historically, it's not great. I'm not saying it's going to, that these guys can't be good or anything like that. But of all the players that I feel like could buck that trend, I think Darnell Wright and Terrell Smith, the corner out of Minnesota, Darnell Wright, their 1st round pick, they do look the best on film. Pickens from the 2 different defensive tackles, there's not as great of a history of low production players bucking trends.
Right.
Zach Pickens and GERVON DEXTER out of Florida. Those guys, DEXTER, both guys 30th percentile or lower in PFF pass rush grade, in run defense grade, over the course of their career. That's going to be a little harder to overcome, I think, at the next level.
Terrell Smith was weird because people either seem to love him or have him nowhere on their list. Like Lance Zierlein, I think, had him in the top 5, something like that.
Yeah.
Like had him ranked really high.
His grades last year were very good. You see him up on the screen.
Yeah.
Grades last year were very, very good.
Exactly. Last year, if you watch just last year's tape, and he had the size, we talked before about the...
I don't think he had 69 interceptions, but,
No, I don't. But,
Maybe he did. Maybe I missed a few.
Maybe. Anyway, he has the size, he's got the athleticism. There's a lot to like. If you look at just last year, you're like, I don't get why this guy wouldn't be a top 10 corner. But overall, on Arif Hassan's consensus big board, he's the number 18th ranked corner. But Arif also has this variance, essentially like how far apart were people generally when ranking this guy. There's no corner that had a higher variance than Terrell Smith. And I believe I'm reading this correctly, that essentially the difference in ranking on the big board was 157 spots between like the highest and the lowest point that Terrell Smith was ranked.
I think the consensus board just kind of probably misses the narrative on him, because Lance Zierlein, it felt like Lance discovered him late and put him in the top 5, and you discovered him late, and people just didn't catch up, so the consensus board didn't catch up.
Effectively, there was only one player in the entire draft who had a higher variance in terms of where people were ranking him than Terrell Smith.
Yeah, to me, that's just because people didn't get there. They didn't get to his film.
Maybe.
It happened late. Someone in the chat's asking about GERVON DEXTER. Again, Florida defensive tackle. His career pass rush grade is 64. His career run defense grade is 66.8. It's just not 3 years of production. A lot of snaps. It's just not that good. He makes plays against the run. He's got good arms and he's got good hands. He can pop offensive linemen, but he's late off the ball.
Yeah.
Very late off the ball, and he just doesn't win very often. That's it. I mean, that's the bottom line. He just doesn't win often enough compared to others. So to me, that's a real stretch, real projection for a second round pick.
Right.
We'll
say. Bottom line for me is Chicago. You give them credit for trading out of number 1, picking up DJ Moore. Like if you put DJ Moore in this draft class, it automatically looks an awful lot better. Darnell Wright is fine. It's an interesting gamble as a player that I don't love, but I understand why teams would. And I'm curious to see how that works out within this offense, which is a good fit for him. Don't love the next 3 picks, but day 3, I like a lot more. Like you start adding now, Roschon Johnson, he's sort of seen as the other Texas running back, with Bijan Robinson, but I think that does him a big disservice. Like Roschon Johnson is a good player in his own right. Tyler Scott is a really intriguing receiver, deep threat option for them. Can do a bit more as well. He's got some underneath run after the catch ability as well. Terrell Smith, we already talked about. Noah Sewell is a very interesting player because he's got a weird body type that doesn't really look like a linebacker, but has been a pretty good player at that position.
You have a weird body type.
I do, yeah. But I like their day 3. Like I think the second half of their draft is much more intriguing to me than the first half.
It is interesting. They actually mentioned like if Noah Sewell, if this was a year ago, he's going second round, or he's going much higher. So he did have a lot of hype earlier before his 2022 season. Roschon Johnson, I'm complete agreement. I like him quite a bit. They polls even cited the fact that he was used in the Wildcat a bunch. Texas offense was kind of fun to watch because you'd have Roschon and Bijan in the backfield and other guys too. But Roschon Johnson, 99th percentile missed tackles forced per attempt. As good as it gets historically, good zone runner. I think he could be a very productive runner, just very difficult to tackle. Not the fastest guy, but just difficult to tackle, holds onto the ball, really good job. I like that pick, Roschon Johnson. So again, I liked some of the picks. I think Noah Sewell's a mid-level type of prospect and good spot for him in round 5. So I think for me, so PFF grade is a B+ over at PFF.com, mostly by Trevor there. I would be a little bit lower. I would grade the Bears' process as excellent over the last 2 years. They took a depleted roster, have added a lot of pieces to it. They've traded down a lot. They've added extra picks. I think the process has been outstanding by the Bears. I just didn't love a lot of their top 100 selections, basically.
Right.
Their 4 biggest picks, I just didn't love those all around. So I'm going to be lower on the Bears.
One of the largest undrafted free agent classes I think the NFL has, like an absolute haul of players here. The most interesting of which I think is probably Tyson Bagent, the Shepherd quarterback that a lot of people loved. Yeah, Division II. He went to did he go to the Senior Bowl? It was one of the All-Star games that he went to because essentially the NFL was saying we have to see this guy against not Division II people.
Right.
So he was getting a ton of love and a ton of interest from the NFL, and then ultimately went undrafted. But that's, anytime you pick up a guy that's getting that kind of buzz as an undrafted, unrestricted free agent, that's pretty interesting.